we were going to move into our small breakout sessions. So just a few housekeeping notes on how this is going to work. First, what will happen is you will receive an invitation to be randomly sorted out into a small group discussion breakout room. All you have to do is accept that invitation. And then when you're in your breakout session, we will have a member of the NAF team, a member of CDF, and a member of the NCBA Inclusive team available there in each room to facilitate the conversations. I think we have some questions already kind of loaded for us to kind of review. This is pertains to the full conference. So we really love your participation. Only point is that we ask attendees not switch breakout rooms in order to be able to maintain the participation within each session. But you can leave at any time. You're not stuck within that breakout room, so that's no worries. And then we will come back as our larger group and do a report out and some final comments. But with that, I think we can move on to the actual breakout sessions. Hello, everyone. Thank you for those joining back with us. I believe we're getting more and more people back into our main session here. So we will go ahead and get started on sort of a report out from our small group discussions. I was really glad to be able to have some of the discussion in our small breakout room. With that, I would like to maybe just give a chance to our facilitators to do a brief report out. Sandy Martini, if you want to go ahead and share more about your group.
Sure. Thank you, Whitney. We had great discussion. It went till the very end. Let's see, here's a few of our top highlights. First of all, we hope a report comes out of this conference, highlighting key points, discussing capital issues that were discussed and the access to capital. Another important point was now is the time for co-ops. Legislation and equity is aligned and barriers are minimal. We are at a tipping point. Looking at policy and changing policy to make co-ops work on reservations. We had a great, robust discussion around that. Everyone would like to keep this conversation going. They would like to also look at the future and look at how modifying co-op model to meet today's needs, thinking about land regeneration and sustainability and stewardship. Finally, now's the opportunity for us to use our own lands.
That's great. Thank you so much, Sandy. I will turn it over to Mike Johnson.
Yep, hello everybody. We had another great discussion, like Sandy's, of course, and one of the main things that stuck out to me, is that community-based models, that capital is not always necessary to be at the forefront, but it's basically community buy-in. I think that's one of the most important things that came out of that. This subsistence-based approach, I think is also another good buy-in that we talked about, that we want to go for subsistence, because that's what we want. That's what we're trying to be here for, especially in Indian country. So it kind of ties into some of the values and some of the things we have already in Indian country. So that's a good model for that. Then there was the legal and regulatory discussion that we talked about, whether or not, it would be how difficult it would be to incorporate some of those laws. Some said that we should use, some of the existing state laws and some of the pros and cons of that. I thought was another good part of that. But I think that the most important thing for me is just, when we got to the last question, is just to make sure that we had, plenty of public buy-in. Indian people generally, are community based, and so when things go, and it's not smoothly all the time, but they generally go pretty good. And so this whole approach to community buy-in through co-ops, I think, is very important as far as whether we're successful or not. And then again, like I said, we determine that success is not necessarily determined upon how much money we raise, but whether or not our system is resilient, whether or not it can overcome some of these market fluctuations, because that's the way it should be when we're forming these co-ops. And so that's pretty much what we had, but it was a great conversation, great people there. And so I personally learned a lot from listening to the participants. Thank you very much, Whitney.
Great. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that. Cindy?
We had a small and shyer group, but the stuff that was said was really great. And, the biggest takeaways from our group was, that in Indian country, there's so many different regions and different types of community and agriculture. So regional and community specific based needs are a big thing when thinking about what the co-op would look like. And then the second big takeaway from it is, educating our communities about these things and what everybody's kind of learned from this series and how they're going to take it back to their own communities and starting from there.
Great. Thank you so much. And I appreciate everyone and their participation in the breakout sessions. We had some really great discussion. So I think we're going to go ahead and move on to our closing remarks. I'm going to turn it over to Doug O'Brien. Doug, do we have you here?
I'm here.
Perfect.
Can you see me? Sorry about
Yes,
that.
we can. No worries. We can see you now.
Okay, excellent. Well, I'll be brief and start with thanks. Thanks to our sponsors. Thanks to all of our presenters. Thanks especially to the co-hosts, NAF and CDF. Thank you to Tony and the entire team at NAF. I do want to give another shout out to Janie Hip and Leslie Mead, who I think were the real drivers. Sandy Martini was always right there in the front seat too. So thank you to everyone and the entire teams at NCBA, CDF, and NAP. It's been a true pleasure. So thank you. The second thing I want to mention is there's a survey coming. Please fill out the survey. Kirsty, I think, is putting it in the chat right now. And it's also going to come to you on Constant Contact. When it comes, please fill it out. It's going to take less than 10 minutes, probably 5 minutes. It's so huge for NAF and CDF and NCBA to get that input so we can continue to do as best we can as we continue down this road and learn from you. Thank you. The next thing I'd say is that I just want to lift up one thing, well, two things. From the US cooperative community, I'll be as bold to speak for them and say that we do stand ready to support and to help in any way that the Native American community determines a path forward. I've made this point in a small group that this obviously is a path that can be chosen only by tribal communities. But I do think that there are things that we can do to help, whether that's examples on things that work or wouldn't work for tribal communities. Models of capital formation we talked about quite a bit, different governance items, and one other one, and I'm going to refer to something that Heather Dawn Thompson talked about at the top of the day. She made the point that many, if not most of the programs at USDA were not designed for people in tribal country. And for those programs that were, many of those, they were designed to get outcomes that weren't good for tribal country. And it's dawning on me that some of even the cooperative policy that was designed typically in the early 20th century, they were designed not for tribal country. We think that they can be applied and they can be used, but if there's policy adjustments that are needed, NCBA CLUSA, that's a core of what we do, and we stand ready to work with people in tribal country and how to improve co-op policy for people in Native American country. And then the final thing I'll say is just how much again from the cooperative community, the non-Native cooperative community, how privileged we have been to learn from the Native American community and the examples yesterday and many of the great speakers and experts, including with Tony Stanger. And I want to hand it off to her and just say thank you again, and we stand ready to support and travel with you in the path on however you think it helps the most. So thank you.
Thank you, Doug. In closing, the Native American Agriculture Fund, NAF, would like to thank all of you for participating over the course of this week. We learned a great deal. We now know the landscape, and we can work together to build the roadmap for future tribal cooperatives. We were all inspired by our speakers. We now know that there are successful tribal cooperatives that have been able to get through the jurisdictional hurdles that oftentimes encumber progress in Indian country. And now we need to gather that knowledge and share it and assist others that are interested in developing cooperatives in their communities, as well as regionally and nationally based cooperatives that we now know are a model and exist. Our next steps, NAF would like to provide an additional survey beyond the one that you're asked to do today. We'll be working with some advisors to create a survey to really hone down on where are the gaps and what can we do to fill those. We're going to work with our partners, Intertribal Agriculture Council, the Indigenous Food and Ag Initiative, Stacy Leeds, who was a speaker earlier, who's interested in working and assisting tribes in the jurisdictional hurdle, but also in taxation, NC, BA CLUSA, as well as the Federation of Southern Cooperatives, and in addition to our federal partners. And we'll utilize those partnerships and reach out to interested individuals that would like to serve in an advisory role as we pursue the continuation of the work that we were able to make this week, and the interest that we have heard overwhelmingly from those that participated, that you want this in your community. We're going to create space for interested parties to educate. That representation will be locally and nationally. And we're going to ask that, how can we pursue federal servicing, federal funding in the next farm bill, wherever it might be, that will be specifically set aside for tribes and tribal cooperatives. Another goal that's come birthed out of this week is potentially to host a national tribal cooperative conference. In addition to that, maybe continuing dialogue such as this webinar, but also other tribal convenings, other conferences that take place. And finally, we know that there's power in numbers, there's power in community, and there's power in bringing traditional beliefs and culture into the modern cooperative structure. And we're here to help make that happen.
Great, thank you so much. And again, thank you to our sponsors for this entire webinar series, CoBank, Farm Credit, and Farmer Mac. So thank you for all your support, and I extend our thank you and gratitude to our co-hosts for this event. With that, we will close out, and just a reminder that we will be sharing out information to a link to a webpage that includes the presentations, and in the coming week, next week, we'll have also the recordings of the webinars available. That'll be available on the webpage that we share, but also on the NAF website as well. So please feel free to check out some of those resources that were also mentioned throughout the entire series. We're going to do our best to compile all of those documents and references to different materials. So thank you so much for attending, and we appreciate all of your time.